All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to get into a really fascinating story. It's about how a field of study, born and raised in the West, had to completely reinvent itself to even begin to understand one of the most complex societies on Earth, India. So let's just start with a really big question. How do you truly understand a society? I mean, is it even possible to get a real picture of a culture if you're using a toolkit, a set of ideas that was designed for a totally different one? It's kind of like imagine trying to measure how much it rained using a thermometer. Sure, you'll get a number, but it's not going to tell you what you actually need to know, right? And that right there was the huge challenge facing sociology when it came to India. You see, the whole discipline came over from Europe, packed with all these theories about things like class and industry and the individual. But it became obvious really, really quickly that if it was going to understand India, it had to pretty much adapt or just completely fail. Okay, so here's the thing. The story of sociology in India, well, it doesn't start in some dusty university classroom. Nope. It actually begins with the very real, very practical needs of colonial rulers. They had to figure out how to govern the people they ruled. Yeah, the British needed information, a lot of it. They had to map out these super complex webs of Indian social life. We're talking everything from caste to family customs. And this wasn't for some academic paper. This was all about governing effectively and, of course, collecting taxes. But, and this is a really critical point, the very act of collecting all this data, using tools like the official census, it actually started to change the society it was trying to describe. It often forced these really fluid local identities into hard, rigid, official boxes.
And this quote, it just nails the point perfectly. This directive, coming straight from a colonial governor, it shows this wasn't some passive academic observation. Oh no, this was an active project, tied directly to money and control. Let's be real. It was a tool for dominance, plain and simple.
So you can actually see this whole evolution happening in three main stages. First, you've got this proto-professional stage. That's basically just data collection for the government. Then it gets more serious and enters the professional stage as it starts showing up in universities. And then finally, after independence, boom, you get this massive expansion stage because now you have a new government trying to build a brand new nation. All right, so that all sets the stage for what comes next, which is a really crucial phase. See, as Indian scholars started to enter the field, they looked around and realized, hey, just borrowing these Western theories, it's not going to work. They knew they had to create a whole new approach. The first huge shift was this idea of contextualization. And okay, it might sound simple, but believe me, it was revolutionary at the time. It basically said, look, you can't understand something like caste or the family in India by trying to compare it to, say, European class structures. That's apples and oranges. You have to study it within its own unique Indian context. And that idea naturally led to indigenization, which, well, it took things even further. This wasn't just about studying things in their context anymore. This was about actively changing the field of sociology itself. It was about creating new concepts, new methods, right from the ground up, to build a sociology that was truly, authentically Indian. And this all sparked a major debate, which is really at the heart of the whole story. You had two camps. On one side, you had the book view. These were the people who said, let's study society through the ancient texts and scriptures. But on the other side, you had the field view. And they were saying, no way, we have to get out there into the villages and study how people actually live their lives.
So, out of this big intellectual debate, you get these pioneering thinkers. I mean, these were the people who really took up the challenge and gave us brand new ways to understand Indian society. They were building a whole new foundation for the discipline. Let's start with the big one, G.S. Courier. I mean, you can't talk about Indian sociology without him. He's widely considered the father of the field. This guy was a powerhouse, a prolific writer, a real institution builder. He literally shaped the discipline for decades, even founding the Indian Sociological Society. And his classic work on the caste system is a perfect example of how he thought. He took this incredibly deep and complex system and just broke it down into these 6 core features. He laid it all out from how society is divided to who you're allowed to marry or even who you can share a meal with. It gave everyone a really clear, systematic way to actually analyze it. Okay, so next up we have M.N. Srinivas. Now, what's fascinating is that he was actually Courier's student, but he took the field in a totally new direction. He was the ultimate champion of that field view we talked about. He was the one who insisted, if you want to understand India, you've got to get out of the library and get your boots muddy in the villages. And from all that time he spent in the field, he came up with some really powerful new concepts. The first one is called Sanskritization. It's a way to describe this key dynamic of social mobility he was seeing, where a lower caste group would essentially try to move up the social ladder by adopting the rituals and the lifestyle of a higher caste. He also gave us the term Westernization. This was his way of defining all the huge changes that came from outside India, especially during the 150-plus years of British rule. And we're not just talking about new technology here. We're talking deep, fundamental shifts in institutions, in values, in the very way people thought. And finally, there's his concept of the dominant caste. This was another incredibly useful tool he developed. It helped to analyze how power actually worked on the ground, in the villages. He showed that it wasn't just about who had the highest ritual status. It was about who owned the land, who had the most people, and who had real political power. So, okay, we've seen this incredible journey, right? From a tool for colonial rulers to a uniquely Indian field of study. So where does that leave us today? Well, it leaves us with a discipline that really, truly found its own voice. Think about that. It managed to completely transform itself from a tool of foreign rule into this vibrant, independent field. It created a totally distinct and vital way of understanding one of the most complex and enduring civilizations on the planet. And you know what? That work is never really done. As scholars like T.K. Oman point out, the focus always has to be on contextualization. It's about remembering there isn't just one single India to study. There are multiple, incredibly diverse realities, all coexisting, and you have to understand them all. And really, when you zoom out, this story isn't just about sociology in India. It leaves us all with a really critical question, no matter where we live. In this crazy globalized world we're in, how do we balance those big, universal ideas with the local, on-the-ground truths of our own communities? It's a tough balancing act, and it's one we're all still trying to figure out.